Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle, as usual. And today, what I want to start with today, Bill, is just so much in our culture and our news media today, and it affects every human being in the country, and that is the coronavirus and where we are with the vaccine rollout. There is just such a massive communication conundrum here in our nation, and to an extent across the world, with messaging on the virus and the vaccine rollout, to get the vaccine, to not. And one thing to sort of set the table here is that I've seen three different real messages here within days.
Right.
Here in the United States, you have Biden saying things will be back to normal by Christmas. I saw somebody else in our government, or in maybe it's with one of the health organizations, CDC or something, that said we're going to have herd immunity by April 2021. I was like, really? Well, that'd be awesome, but I'm not so sure about that. And then you have Dr. Fauci came out within the last couple of days and said we may be wearing masks into 2022. Very confusing messages that it occurs to me are not very helpful, and I'm concerned for us as a nation.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the challenges in communication is that there's a difference between opinion and fact, and opinion gets to have like a half fact rationale element to it. It's like, I have an opinion. Well, when I have an opinion, I have a form of certainty. I'm actually meeting my need for certainty, which is a form of truth. Is that my opinion is my feet are on the ground. My opinion that this desk is solid. Well, the truth is that, the desk is a bunch of molecules, and there's a lot of space in between each one of those, electrons and neutrons and protons. There's a lot of space between it. So which level of truth do we want to talk about? It's solid. From the observable mind, my desk is solid. I'm looking around. It looks pretty solid to me, Tom. So that is the truth, but not at the molecular level. It isn't. So the same thing happens with opinions. Well, that opinion that says, herd immunity at April 2021, it's like, how does that work? And how can that person have that opinion? Well, they're basing their evidence on XYZ. Same thing with, Biden, it'd be normal at Christmas. He's setting an intention. He's setting a vision. It may be true and it might not be true. And then the pessimistic Dr. Fauci is setting the 2022 masks into 2022. So truth is a little problematic, and the messenger, the person that's delivering it, is really mostly trying to meet their needs on, in a convincing, authentic way. So, but they're only operating from their version of truth or their version of certainty, or what they're setting the intention to do, because they really don't really fully know the future and what's going to happen.
Well, I agree. They certainly don't know. And, I'm thinking back to some episodes we did maybe a year ago in the midst of, all the Democrats campaigning and running for the Democratic nomination, where we talked about how a good leader sets the vision.
Right. Right.
And I can see how Biden is trying to set a vision that, hey, things should be normal by Christmas. He's giving a positive message that shows some light at the end of the tunnel, gives people, trying to give people some confidence that this is not going to go on forever, but also not sort of sugarcoating it and saying that it's magically going to disappear come spring either, right?
Right.
And I can also see Dr. Fauci, who's a scientist, probably really not focused on trying to set a vision. He's more just trying to give an accurate estimate based on
Right.
his experience and his assessment of what's happening. So you have that
Correct.
sort of, it's interesting, you have like different thinking styles and presentation styles there, right? You got
Different thinking
Dr.
styles.
Fauci is like, hey, it's science, it's this or that, it's not halfway, or he's careful to say, well, we don't have enough evidence to support that yet. If somebody asks him a question he really doesn't know the answer to,
That's
whereas
right.
Joe Biden, the president, is saying, hey, we're making progress, we're getting the vaccine out there, and as long as enough people get vaccinated, we're going to be back to normal by Christmas this year. We can, by the end of the year, we
Yeah.
can be, this can be over effectively, right?
That's right. That's right. And so you set that vision out there, and whereas he's Biden is relatively, I mean, he's coming across as humble, he's coming across as concerned, and he's doing a vigil for all the people that have died, and take care of each other. We're Americans here. This is not political. He's trying to bring the kind of the ship down to the spot. It's like, this is your fellow American. This is, we're losing a lot of people here. Come on, folks, and just generally doing that way. So that's really helpful, which is different than the optimistic marketing branding message that Trump would promote. It's going to go away. It's not an issue. We're ahead of this. We're strong. We're confident. We're Americans. And that message is way on the other end of truth, which is, yeah, we are confident Americans. Yeah, we can do this, but wear your damn mask. And, at the same time, we are a nation that can come together. But see, that's the kind of the rat trap that he got himself caught in, which is that you can't have a message of division with a virus. You, a message of division works with a marginally legal thing, or even an illegal thing. It could actually work in a courtroom, that it's like, well, yeah, I guess I could give you the benefit of the doubt. And gosh, is it really worth it to lock this person up? And the answer is no. Yes, they did break the law, but somehow they got out with just a slap on the wrist. And that is really, really problematic because you get the marketing and branding message, which is, it's all going to go away, and it's one, it was one person, and it's one person for China. We have this under control. And meanwhile, it's like there's no troops that are actually doing that. There's nobody able to protect it.
Well, and now you've got the marketing message of the pure numbers that's come out. I mean, we've reached a sobering milestone now, Bill. 500,000, more than 500,000 Americans have died of
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
I was shocked to learn yesterday that that is more people than died in World War One, World War Two, and Korea combined, or something like that. I forget
Or
the,
Vietnam, yeah, or
or
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Yeah.
They haven't put Korea in yet,
Why is
but
that?
it's
It just because too many people?
because the numbers aren't high enough yet. Yeah,
Oh,
so Korea has so many deaths, and as soon as the next milestone, it's going to be World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, and Korea. They'll stick it on the end because I don't know
well,
how many people
to
died in
me
Korea,
that
but
was shocking. I was really, I mean, look,
that's really
I'm
shocking. Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, I'm a my grandparents were baby boomers, and no, I'm sorry, grandparents were the greatest generation. My parents are baby boomers. Um and my grandparents, the greatest generation, and fought in World War II. Everyone did that. I mean, that was a relative of mine of that age. And while I knew a lot of history of World War II, I thought somehow a lot more people, like Americans, would have died in that global conflict than did. I was kind of surprised, because to me, to say even just more people died in World War II, and I guess more Americans, American soldiers. Let's be make not
Right.
worldwide here. Um, that to me sort of proportionalized this. It to me that made it seem much bigger to me
It
than
did.
I really realized it was. So you got these kind
Mhm.
of messages coming out, and this is why I'm saying there's a lot of confusing messages. I mean, there seems to be reason to hope that the vaccine seems to be working.
Yeah.
There's been some supply interruptions due to weather and transportation recently, and that's unfortunate,
Yes.
but it seems we're going to overcome that quickly. And I have
Yeah.
no idea when
So
I'm going to get the vaccine, because I'm not essential enough or old enough, and I'm decided I'm going to get the vaccine when it's available to me, even though I'm quite certain I already had COVID-19. I mean, I still think I could get it again.
the offering of and the availability of and people, and I was invited at CVS Pharmacy to schedule my, and even though I'm not the 65 that maybe the guy thought I was, which is a whole nother problem. So he goes, "Hey, are you going to take your vaccine? Because you certainly look like you need one." No, uh,
I would dispute that, but okay, go ahead.
I know. So I look like it. So like, no, I don't look like it. So anyway, so the messaging, in regards to supply and demand, because you don't want everyone to rush the grocery store and take everything out of the grocery store, which is a experience that's happening in Texas during the weather. There isn't anything on the shelf, because this is could be a long run on this thing. That it's, we need the food, we need to move everything out, so they cleaning out their stores. So there is the biggest problem with the balance between a capitalist system and a supportive socialist system. Supportive socialist is not a proactive socialist system. And this is where a good example of where, if you start splitting, you know, the word up, socialism, into two different categories, well, then it's a socialist system looks like this thing, whereas a capitalist system looking to that removes competition and incentive, which is not particularly strong. And what do we do to really separate and develop two new words for socialism, so that we can't, somebody uses it and pretends they know what the definition is, because they don't really actually know what the definition is. So it's really hard, with our communication messaging, to get a clear target on many things. And I think we can do a whole podcast on what do you rename socialism so it works,
That's a
so
great
you can
idea.
actually
It
think.
to as a branding and
um,
marketing exercise to relabel socialism to some, because I think that socialism in many circles is considered a dirty word. It's considered un-American, even though you know, I mean, I think a lot of people consider it un-American. Let me put it that way. Not everybody. And I think actually recently Texans got sort of a lesson in that sort of shoved in their
big,
faces, right?
they sure did.
Because here 20 years ago the state of Texas decides they're going to separate themselves from the rest of the national grid. For the most part, there's very few county exceptions to this, but and because they didn't want federal regulation, and and it's part of the whole anti-socialism narrative. And then when they're in dire straits and they have no electricity and they have no water, and then as you said, the whole shelves are getting, there's a run on the stores for everything. then, and the other interesting thing I found is people that have this electric, service that is tied to the market, the demands of the market, supply and demand. There are people in Texas that literally in this last week have gotten electricity bills for 7,000, 9,000, one for even almost $17,000, which is
Right.
just absurd. But when you don't have government regulation to help make sure that people are treated fairly and they're not abused in a serious supply and demand situation, which actually supply and demand is really what we're seeing going on with this vaccine distribution. There are some parallels here. And I know a lot of people in Texas saying, hey, that's not fair, right? This isn't fair. Well, what isn't fairness sounding like everybody should be treated equally?
Yeah, that's pretty much so. Yeah, that is. And that's I mean you can make, I mean, it's, and you and I have been taught as business guys, you and I have been taught pick a niche and grow rich. Stand for something, and it's okay if people don't want the thing you stand for, but at least the people who know what you stand for or what you want are going to sign up. um, Stick with your message, be consistent with the product or service, so that find the person that's going to buy that product and service. Now if you apply that to capitalism, if you apply that to socialism, you see how that gets all wonky really quick, because you've got to like figure out how to meet multiple needs. How do you do fairness, and how do you do motivation? How do you create an incentive when you're trying to meet everybody's needs, but meanwhile you're trying to keep this, this ambition inside a human being going, which is one of the things that capitalism does. It's like, gosh, I want to work really hard so I have a beach house. I want to work really hard so I have a boat that I can go of and have a Trump flag on it. I want to work hard for that, and that's, because I have mine. I got mine and I was able to get mine. And he's a person that represents somebody that gets mine. He's not interested in getting everybody a piece of it. He wants mine to be mine and his to be his. And I'm going to vote for that. See, there's we could have a lot of understanding and compassion for people that vote both liberal and conservative. We can have a lot of compassion for why they're on fire about the thing they're in, because what they're focusing on is the thing that they see as most important. Somebody walking down the street and seeing plastic bottles, laying all around, and go like, the environment, we cannot keep treating the environment like this, and we just can't, and I was walking down the beach in California. It's like, oh my gosh, look at the layers of sand that has plastic in it. I'm going like, how do we clean this up? So somebody's got to clean this up, and the word somebody is not me. It's somebody else. It's already implied that it's somebody, it's not me, instead of me walking down and doing a baggage, bringing a bag and just cleaning shit today. So it's really, really hard. It's really hard because we got to balance our needs. And that balance our needs is really more of a socialism narrative than a capitalism narrative. Is how do I get my product and service, and it might have an impact on somebody in the future, but I'm not really actually worried about that, which is, that's, it's problematic. So,
Well, and don't some of these same feelings and needs that you're talking about socialism, capitalism, you know, doing taking action yourself and doing something for the good of all, or leaving it to someone else, somebody's got to do it, not me. Isn't this all we see parallels of this with this whole coronavirus vaccine dynamic, don't we?
we really do. And the biggest parallel I can see, and if I want to, give a moment of acknowledgement and just I even feel, compassion around this, is that how difficult was it for the Trump administration to literally be, for the people that wanted to do something about it, not so much the counter messages, but the people that wanted to do something about it, that they could not fast walk masks. They couldn't fast walk it. They could not tell to the American public, listen, everybody needs to get a mask, and need to get a mask now. Could not give that message in February a year ago. Couldn't, because if they give that message, there would not be a mask to be found for the doctors and the healthcare workers. There just wasn't any around. There was not time to ramp up. Now, that cost the lives of not having a supply ready, because that's capitalism does not want to have a supply ready. They want somebody else to store it and produce it. They just want to distribute and collect the check. They don't want to produce it, and they don't want to store it. But a part of government is have something ready just in case a worst case scenario to take place. Have the national stockpiles be at this thing. But the problem with the concept of a national stockpile is you have to count it and store it and refresh it. That all costs money. And if I'm a capitalist person, I'm going like, I don't want to spend money on that. Let somebody else store it.
Well,
And that's what ended up happening.
Americans and America as a whole rarely prepares for the rainy day sort of in all that way. We're very
That
much
is,
reactive.
I really appreciate you saying rainy day. That's right. We are not rainy day people, man. We are not ready for it. We'll complain about it when it shows up.
But
Oh
in
my
some
God, the
ways,
flood.
isn't it interesting? In some ways we are, though. Usually it's after the fact, right? I mean, of course, we all know Hurricane Katrina 2005, how devastated New Orleans and Louisiana was. And now,
Sandy on the East Coast.
yeah, but now though in New Orleans they've built stronger levees. They close gates that so the city won't flood, to a certain storm surge level and all this. And they're reactive though. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. We're not doing that again.
Right.
But look at one way, as long as I can remember, probably my whole life. I don't know if you know when it started, Bill, but in one way, America has prepared for the rainy day. And I think it's because of capitalism more than anything. We have, as a country, a strategic oil reserve. We
We do.
actually do stockpile oil that can be turned into gasoline. I mean, a lot of it. And I think that came out of after World War II, when there was such a high demand for oil for all the military operations. I remember hearing from my grandparents, yeah, we during the early 1940s, while we're at war, we couldn't just go buy gas anytime we wanted at a local filling station. You had to have a card that you had a certain level of approval, or it was rationed.
Right.
You could only get so much, right?
Oh yeah, remember those days? Sure. That's a thing. And the stockpile, having the strategic stockpile, and the reason why no one's poking at that form of socialism or that form of protection for the military is that um, they're they're not to be surprised by this rise of the power of another nation. We don't want to experience a world another Pearl Harbor. I mean, that was the kind of like the shocking event. And as 9/11 was the Pearl Harbor that caused us to go to the Middle East, that is really why those stockpiles or those safety things. But with the pandemic, it's hard to put a face on a virus. It's hard to put a face on a disease. It's this other thing. You can't make it personal as much.
That's
You
interesting.
know,
So it's really an invisible enemy
visible enemy.
until it is on your doorstep, I guess, or you have a family member that is in the hospital or you've lost, maybe, isn't that part
That's
of the
right.
problem?
That's a part. Yeah, it's America keeps thinking it can get away with isolationism. It just can't. It keeps thinking it can. It can be. We don't want those foreigners here. We think we can get away with that, and the answer is like we just sort of can't. And there's a couple of different factors about why we can't do that. Number one, our birth rate is not. It's just at. I've got to look at our recent birth rate, but at one time it was not, replacing itself. It was like, uh-oh, there was not like Italy has that huge problem too, is that their birth rate was 1.3 per couple. The average was that low. It's like,
Wow.
why are and Japan has the same problem with their birth rate too, is that that's like they're not they're not have people are not having children, and therefore when you don't have children, then you don't have people to run the next generation because you need people to grow up. And then the school systems, what happens when there is a drop off of a population, and that happened in the 80s when the
Right.
baby boomers moved through and all the schools went flat because there was no kids that were
Yeah,
in
there
there.
was this incredible growth in the 50s and 60s of schools because of all the baby boomers. And after that generation sort of peaked, there's a decline. And, economies are built on growth. They're really
There are
not
built
built
on
on flat lines, you know?
They are not built on flat lines. They are not. It's like, well, where am I going to sell my product? Well, you got to have a person to do that. You have to have somebody who's going to buy that thing. So, so these are, this is where black and white thinking does not work. This is the problem with my thinking. And from a communication standpoint, the supply and the demand narrative, that is one that has to balance both fairness and growth at the same time, has to look at opportunities as well as safety. It cannot be straight. You cannot necessarily, you know, go full out and burn out the environment and eat all the cabbage. You just can't like do you can't do that, because then you got no cabbage and then all these people are starving. Same thing with the masks. You cannot say at the front end of the Trump disease thing that you cannot say this. Now, they could have, and Trump could have said, let's do the national thing, let's get the masks done, and then let's get everybody in a mask. He would now be president. He would still be president if he would have handled this thing. That those things, let's not pretend that he doesn't have enough votes. He had enough votes. And if he would have handled the pandemic, and people would have given him a verbal pass if he would have turned into a public servant.
I
He
agree.
didn't.
He had a ball teed up for him on a tee like a 5-year-old would have at the baseball plate, not having the ball pitched to him. The ball would have been sitting on a tee, and all he
Sitting
had
on
to
the
do
tee.
was swing at it. He would have at least gotten, you know, on base. And he just really never stepped up to the plate when it came to the coronavirus. And obviously making sort of a metaphor here, but he done that, had he appeared to really care about the virus situation in a meaningful way, he would have won re-election in a walk.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, and it's surprising to me that somebody close around him didn't say the would have gotten him to do it. Here's what he could do it. All he had to do is really put three sentences next to it, and Trump would have turned into a public servant. The three sentences are: listen, I'd really like to acknowledge and recognize you for your strengths and your ability to uh, uh, deliver a message of that engages people. That's message number one. So you meet the need for recognition and acknowledgement first for the president. The second thing that really needs to be said is that I wonder what it would look like if you can use your messaging skills to get people to do something that would protect all of them. I wonder what that would have looked like. And God, well, but I don't know if you could really do that. What would be a good message if you were to do that? He would take it as a challenge. You go like, "Oh yeah, watch how I pull the livers. Watch this Twitter tweet I do about masks. What do I watch this thing I do this, you know?" And God, I wonder what that message would look like as a positive, optimistic message that demonstrated strength. He would have came up with it, and he would have been the mask guru guy.
So if you were like his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and you had, taken that kind of message to the president, you could have almost challenged him or baited him
Oh,
into.
challenged and made it impossible for him to do it. I don't think you could do that. I'm not sure if you, well, I guess you could. Listen, you were really successful with that drain the swamp. I wonder how that would look with, put the mask on and make mask fashionable. Why don't you go ahead and do it this way? Let's see if we can brand and market your mask. Let's see if we can do it this way. And it would have been, it's like, and it would have said it instead of make America great again, it would have been, America strong across this, or uh, Trump this virus. I mean, for
Right. I
God's
mean,
sake.
on a mask and distribute those everywhere. And
Yeah.
I mean, we even talked about mask messages in the past during the campaign. Yeah, it could have been an entirely different
It could have
thing.
been a thing.
But
It could have been a
instead, the
thing.
president just goes off on his, labeling and diagnosing of these things, calling it the Kung flu or whatever, trying to blame it on
He was
China.
looking for the enemy. See,
Yeah.
he tried to sign an inanimate particle, which is what a virus is, until it hooks onto a cell. He tried to make it being responsible for an enemy image. And that's that isolationism stuff that tapped in. And our nation has experienced the Trump things in around World War II. There was all kinds of people that go like, it is over there. This is their fight. We do not need to be over there. And literally there were candidates hammering the nation not to get and spend our affluence and resources over there to those people that are fighting them each other. Just let them be there. And can you imagine that if, I mean, because Hitler's ability, or how close they were to having a nuclear bomb,
Oh yeah.
would have that would have just reset the whole Europe. I mean, really, basically Nazi Germany, the suppression. We had we would have had the coronavirus problem that we have now from a political ideological piece that it was just been a darn right mess is what it would have been, so
Yeah,
but
no,
it's
I mean, I could imagine it would have been entirely different if Pearl Harbor had not happened. Hitler probably would have been allowed to get a much stronger foothold, probably would have made it across to Great Britain, which, never otherwise did, because the Americans were involved in it at that point. And I mean, yeah, there's a whole potential history shift
there is.
there.
Yeah.
Um, and technology being a big one. I think the Germans had came up with jet engine airplanes in World War II before we did too. I mean,
Right.
all sorts of
Right. All
things.
things, man. All
Wow.
kinds of things.
So it's
It
interesting
is.
if you sort of correlate that to the virus, because it was a virus, I guess, of sorts, is
It
what you're
was.
saying.
And the idea is, I mean, we could do a podcast on this, is that it's that ideas are viruses. I mean, you gotta decide if you're going to spread, what idea you're going to spread. Are you going to go after something that really helps people to gain a healthy perspective about themselves and about others, a healthy way to grow into things. And social media messages are viruses. They call it that. How many viral clicks are you getting for this message? This message went viral. Oh my gosh. Now, is viral good? Well, in social media, it's good. In medicine, it's not good.
Well, and it's interesting. We have this supply and demand going on of the vaccine distribution, and it's very interesting because I think there's a lot of uncertainty about how this is going to play out right now, Bill. And we started by talking about the messages of the virus, and you know, truly as a nation to get out of this thing, we need as many people to get the vaccine as possible. Right now, there's not enough supply to meet the demand. I wonder what's going to happen when there's an oversupply. Plenty to meet the demand. Do enough people get the virus? I'm sorry, do enough people get
Vaccine,
the
yeah, sure.
vaccine?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. The next set of messaging that needs to take place in order to get engagement of the next group of folks, and as it moves around, because there's in the transmission of things, I mean, it's a toughie. I mean, this virus affecting older folks, is being treated completely different if it was a virus that if it affected children. If it was affecting children and you started losing children over this, oh my gosh, then it's the catastrophic experience of a race, of a species under attack, because then it's like, how are you going to come back from this? And it's not like our species hasn't had problems like this with the plague and stuff like that in the past, and other viruses. So Tom, it's going to be interesting. Let's take a look at how we can talk about communication and the supply and demand, how messaging needs to take place in order to get the nation to support itself, to protect itself, and then making sure the product lines work, both in a socialism way and a capitalism way. It's got to work both. It can't be one or the other. So it's a good place for us to stick and move forward from.
I appreciate that, Bill. Yeah, I think you're right. There has to be a balance. It can't be socialism all bad, capitalism all good. I think we're seeing that play out in our nation right now. You have to have a balance, don't you?
Yeah, you've got to have a healthy narrative of going, like, you can't just not inspect things like wind turbines and gas lines. They won't work if you don't inspect them. You kind of like got to watch things.
Okay.
All right, Tom, have a good one. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.